Ladies and gentlemen, let's do a rundown. The first one I do of this split. Forgive me for not doing the regular rundowns. I'm just not feeling super excited about the BO1s, and I figured I would do like a bigger one in regards to the state of the league, general opinions of where the teams are at, where they can improve, and some of like initial thoughts and feedback on what we see so far in terms of the standings. So currently, after week one, we have Fnatic, SK Gaming, Team BDS on 3-0, all of them. And then Karmine Corp on the 2-1. And then G2 1-2, Mad Lions 1-2, Rogue 1-2, Team Heretics 1-2. And finally, Giants, and also a big surprise here, Vitality 0-3. Let's talk about every single team. Team Vitality, let's start there. They started off 0-3. You know, the hope was that Linsas was come in here, and you know, a big issue for Vitality last split and also in winter is their insane structureless gameplay when it comes to mid to late game. I think that individually this team has been strong and they've managed to like play out strategically worse scenarios better than other other teams that were below them in the standings. But in terms of their setups and how they play together on the map, I think that it's very, very flawed. I think a big issue is that Viteo seems to be very disconnected from the team. I think his judgment of side lane is very poor, and he gets caught on side quite a bit. I think that Photon and Kazi are strong performers, but they don't carry a lot of the agency. I also, you know, Hilly is a friend of mine, but I have to call out his performance. I think in this week one, I think that he looks very similar to how he looked in winter. I think that there is very little rationale behind the angles that Hilly is looking for. He kind of gets caught in situations, or like, it's not even getting caught. He's just looking for opportunities that aren't really there, posturing very aggressively, and pulls his team into bad fights. I feel like Vitality can't find any structure in their gameplay. I think that the only like good thing so far about Vitality in my mind, I think, is that at least they are like experimenting with some AP jungles. I think that they had a game that they should have won with the 10k gold advantage that they threw right with the Yone and so forth. I do think that their read of the meta is more similar to what we've seen in the LPL, and I think that's neat. But I think Viteo, I think not being impactful with gold, not being impactful as the game progresses, not side laning is a problem. But I think the key issue, I think that you will get to see Kazi and Photon's strength if Hilly and Linsas actually begin to work together. Because right now we don't see the effect of the change. I think that in the end, the main thing is like, how can they set up vision so the solo lanes can farm? How can they connect together? And how can they actively choose their fights as 5 rather than doing it very sporadic? There seems to be very, 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 very little planning in regards to what they want to fight and not fight. It's just so spontaneous, and it seems like such a tense way of playing the game. But I do think that this roster has they have some talent players. I think Kazi, Photon, very strong players. I think Viteo had a good split right on Team Heretics before they moved on from him to Perks. I know that Hilly-san can have high peaks, but right now it's not looking great. And at least something that we can highlight is that at least this format is now cut down, that the first week is super week, and then the rest of the weeks now is going to be 2 games, 2 games, 2 games, which makes it less stressful in terms of the, overall intensity of how the league plays out. So that's positive. As Team Vitality, let's talk about Team Heretics. I think Team Heretics as a team, I feel like their mechanical ceiling is so low. It's tough to watch. I feel like their mechanical ceiling is so low, and right now, especially for example, the most recent game against Mad Lions, Wunder, Jankos, they have like the right ideas, but they misexecute their dives. They play 2v2s wrong. They mechanically misplay when the idea is correct. I do think this is a team with some solid ideas, but then in terms of like the lane phase on bottom side and in terms of what their potential is, it's like the opposite of Team Vitality. I do think that they can like piece together some setups and play for the right space, but then in terms of the execution, it's always lacking. And that's the tough part, you know? I think, you know, Team Heretics as a team, Trimby as well, I feel like he has just lost the spark, you know? In this game, the most recent game, Nautilus, like he had 2 Nautilus performances, he was just getting caught on cooldown. Happened the same against BDS, posturing for space. They're not really in tune in that, and I think Trimby is kind of underperforming. He's performing worse than he did in spring. I feel like Team Heretics have, they have a low ceiling, but at least, you know, there's some game ideas, you know. I don't know what else to add. It's just that it looks mechanically unimpressive. That's a lot harder to solve than the issue of Team Vitality, because I think potential is always measured through mechanical skill, and I think that this team is really lacking it. I feel like they have put together a cast of players that are very good complementary players. There is no real person that stands out to me as the guy that is going to set them up for success. And I feel like they're really missing that, you know? Like Zviru had his best games on like Nico, more supportive. Jankos, I didn't see him as a carry jungler, even though he tries. Wunder, weak side king, you know? Like I think he does better in those situations. And the same thing for Flacket. I think Flacket, when I think of him, is like he pulls a lot of weight in draft because he can play unique champions. But other than that, you know, I think it's quite tough, you know? I feel like they are missing a player that can be like a driving force and where they feel comfortable. If this player has gold, they're going to win. If we compare it to, for example, like let's say a Kazi or even Team BDS, it's like when I'm watching Team BDS games, when I see Ice with gold, I know that this guy is going to pop off and win. I feel the same with Caps, I feel the same with Humanoid, and you know, I feel the same thing now with Rahel, you know? So like you kind of need those players. You kind of really need those players that are a driving force. So it's like in terms of how this roster has been built, you know, it's really missing something. You know, I think the angle that you kind of wanted to come with, right? Like if you kind of took a time machine and went back, like Jankos, Wunder, you fucking make Perks play support in the off season, take the next best rookie AD carry that you can keep, like a Jack Spectra, and then you put in like a mid laner, like for example Vladi or Jackies. Like I think that would be like a very interesting angle. You have these young guns surrounded by veterans that can grow into like very strong players. I think that could be something interesting, you know? That could be something very interesting. But, you know, in comparison to my feedback around Team Heretics, I think it's harder to see the angle here. I think that, you know, they are trying to play 2v2 through topside. That's what Jankos and Wunder have seen. But today's game was an example of like mechanical misexecution. At least in that first win when Wunder played Kisante, he still had it in him. So maybe this is still the best angle they can play for, you know. I think that the best bet is for Team Heretics to find some draft wins. Team BDS, 3-0. 3-0 plain and simple. I think that, you know, I'm trying to remember the game. So basically, they beat G2, which was a sloppy game from G2 with the Cannon draft that they made, and then the steal away against Team Vitality, where Vitality threw. I do think that Team BDS is... I'm so impressed by Ice and Labrov, man. These guys just keep getting better and better. I think that these guys are fucking great, man. They are really good. I think that Ice and Labrov these are the type of players that should be like recruited, you know, by teams in the long run. I feel like Ice and Labrov had fantastic week one. They were really insane in spring as well. I think the main thing about BDS, what I like, is that their trajectory in terms of what they are trying to improve on, I think is really, really good, man. Really, really good. I think Ice coming into spring, them really focusing more on the Aphelios and the Jinxes after having a very successful split on Jhin and Varus and Ashe, really rechanging, revamping how Ice's role on the team, which was super cool because BDS as a team, where it was very niche where this team would function. It would be like mages on mid, supportive ADCs to make Labrov be able to roam into mid, 3v3 on mid lane, and then Adam play the Gods champs, and then Shio being active level 1, 2, 3, 4, and keeping the game busy together with Labrov. I could describe BDS in a sentence. But in spring, additionally, Adam started to play the champs he doesn't play. A big criticism for me towards Adam was that you have your Darius, you have your Olaf, but you're not playing the champions that are currently OP, and all the OP champs are good against your champs. TF, Rumble, Dragoon, like all these champions were pickable into Mr. Adon, and it was a liability. But today he had a pretty fucking solid Gragas performance. The main thing now that's missing for me when it comes to BDS, it's like I want to see more consistency from Shio, and additionally I would like to see Nuclear Int understand together with Shio how they need to dominate side lane together when they have the champions to do so. I think Nuclear right now, he seems to me as a player that is really good on mages, because I think he understands how to contest Dig Bush, and he understands how to posture and gets like damage in when they're doing Drake setups. But the main thing that's missing for me is that they need to be able to play 2v2. Like today, the Tristana was very underwhelming, very underwhelming. The one positive thing that happened from Nucleant was the fact that he attacked the cannon on site, got a kill on cannon on site, and that accelerated the game. But that game was very delayed because BDS didn't know how to play a side lane game. A good example today, if you take a look at it, is like you see some Tristanas in LPL. Those are easy votes to study. You know, easy votes to study. Tristana is stronger than most champions in the 1v1, stronger in the 2v2, has very flexible itemization, especially this game. You could just go Mercs because you would beat Cannon and Hui with the Mercs. And I think that you have a lot more potential to tap into. I think if BDS understand how to leverage stronger side laners, they have a lot more options around objectives. Because right now it's like either the objective or bust. And I think this is the main thing that I think BDS need to work on. But today they picked Tristana, which means maybe they're aware of it and it's something that they want to implement. So that's good. You know, that's good. Sol says in the chat they don't play enough champs. That's the main thing that they are improving on, right? I pointed out Adam. We want to see more from Nuclear Int. And additionally, you know, I think Ice has really, really added to the pool. And I think the meta right now is really good for Labrov. You know, engaged supports. His rel has been wonderful. Absolutely beautiful. I think that Labrov has been a beast. So I think BDS, like I put Vitality. I follow the gut feeling that I think that they are third. But I think BDS has shown enough that to make me think, and Vitality has shown enough that my prediction is just terrible, right? And that's okay. That's okay. Let's move on to SK Gaming. This is a very interesting conversation point because the reaction to SK Gaming signing those two players was right away, LEC is turning into LCS, why are so many imports coming in, blah, blah, blah. Like, first and foremost, I hate this surface level narrative conversation because as a GM, if I'm a GM, I'm going to look at every fucking pool of players and assess any type of play that I can get to make my organization better. I think it's really, really, you can't, as a GM, not tap into all of the player bases available to you. If you don't do that, you are really pranking yourself. If you think there is some altruistic thing about getting an European play into your org because you want to improve or strengthen the region, that doesn't make any sense. It's like you bring a player into your org because you believe he's going to grant value to the organization. Whatever he does after the fact doesn't really matter to you. You wish him well, you have history tied together, but wherever he goes after, if he goes back to his home region or doesn't, or go to a different region, it doesn't matter at all. The only measurement that matters is performance. Of course, when you sign a foreign player, you're going to have to think about resources. You're going to have to think about translation, food, how to, of course, accommodate this player. And this can be costly. But the main thing that I want to hammer home is that you can never, ever judge a player just because, oh, he's Korean. Wow, LEC is ruined. It doesn't make any sense. If you're signing a player just because he's European, you're trolling. If you're signing a player just because he's Korean, you're trolling. If you're signing a player just because he's a rookie, you're also trolling. If you're signing a player just because he's won in the past and you expect him to win in your organization too, you're also trolling, because these are surface level information. You need to go deeper to assess a player's skill. You need to talk to his peers. You need to talk to him. You need to understand the resources he needs in order to function at the level that you expect. And that is the main thing. That is the main thing that you have to do when you assess players. So when people are saying, yo, LEC is turning into LCS, keep in mind, there's been imports that have done more for the region than players from the region itself. Think about it. The most impactful players in the LCS is Bjergsen, Jensen, JJ, Impact. It's like the list is damn long. Sven, Mithy was over there. Reaper is coaching. Berserker, right? It's like the list is so damn long of players that have improved the league. There's definitely been examples of players just being signed because they're Korean. And that's a mistake, but that's just shit GMing. But it can happen across the board. So I really, really hated the reaction to SK signing these players. Not because they're 3-0 now. I would have said the same. I've said the same multiple times on stream before they played too. If people argued on the merit of these two players, saying, whoa, I watched Rahel play, he's kind of bad. Why the fuck are they signing him? That's a fair point. But people were reacting to it, saying, not having a single clue about how good they are, and fucking virtue signaling about the fucking LEC and how the players regionally should play. All these fucking people that went on Twitter and talked shit, they didn't know jack shit about Rahel or fucking Luon. They didn't know shit about it. They don't know shit about these players. And that wasn't the point of criticism that SK took. SK got criticism because they signed 2 Korean players. And then people said, yo, they should have got Limited Neon. They have Limited Neon. Limited Neon did good in the past in the LEC. That's what people work with. Bro, SK have enough information to fucking judge the fact that, internally, SK is an organization that works on a low budget, That's what they pride themselves on. They want to be fucking profitable. Do you think if they had Limit and Neon and they thought they would be good enough to play for their LEC roster with Niski and Irrelevant on the roster, then you don't think they would have sent that? Come on. Let's be honest here, yeah? The only metric you should go by is how well are these players going to do in your organization? That's the only thing that matters. I don't give a fuck where you're from, because there's been imports in this region that have done so much for this region. Even in LEC, man. Even in LEC, think about it. Huni, right? Huni, Rainover, Trick, right? These are players that have done so much for the region. And on the flip side, there's been bad imports too. But the same thing, there's been bad rookies. There's been bad European players. Happens. Happens. It's just bad GMing. That's it. Now, moving on to SK. My read here, after looking into Rahel, I thought Rahel was a good pickup. I thought Luon was kind of a slot in here to make Rahel more comfortable, get him a Korean support and so forth. I didn't think, when I looked up a couple of Luon games, I wasn't too impressed. But I only looked at a couple. It was like 3, 4. It wasn't that big of a deal. It wasn't that big of a pooled sample size. So I can still say that I went into this rather blind. But after the fact, now after 3 games, Rahel and Luon, fucking solid, man. Fucking solid. 2v2 killing G2's bot lane, playing super well. Rahel posturing. Luon having really good understanding of how to play his support. Really liked his Nami gameplay. Really liked his Renata gameplay. The type of presence of an AD carry that you want to have. When an AD carry has items, builds items, get items, and he has a presence in the game. I love that a lot. I think that SK Gaming made fantastic pickups if we isolate week 1, right? I think the main thing for me is that we saw a wide range. We saw Renata, Ashe, Nami. I think that's a wide range of lanes that they played and were rather impactful on. So I think that this was a very, very positive signing. And I'm not saying that just because they're better than Exekick and DOS, because Exekick and DOS, sadly, they left a very, very low bar to reach. I do think that Rahel and Luon, very, very solid. Now, the main thing that I want to see more of from SK Gaming side is how Isma is going to develop, because I feel like Isma sometimes, when it comes to the 5 to 15 minute mark, I think he misses where he needs to be. And that's where they need to work together with the bot lane a little bit better. I didn't like, for example, today that he's contesting 2v2 with an Azir. He's going through Raptors and dying level 1 on the level 1 play. I hope that Isma finds a level of consistency that makes a lot more sense. If I think back of the Isma that played on Movistar together with Mad Lions, he was very sharp at finding the timings to gank bot. If they find these synergies again together with support, I think it will be super, super cool. Because I remember, of course, Isma and Alvaro, they were a very, very good jungle support duo. So this is the main thing that they need to really, really work on. I think Irrelevant in terms of where he needs to farm in the later parts of the game. This is my main concern for Irrelevant. I think he's a fantastic laner, great team fighter, but in terms of where he needs to be as the game progresses, I think this is where maybe a G2 is going to tear them apart. Fnatic is going to tear them apart. I think that the amount of income that Irrelevant generates and how he plays his position in the game, I think that he really needs to study some Bin VODs, some Zeus VODs in terms of how he generates farm, or even Keen, of course, how he generates farm for himself and chooses more actively the moments where he walks on the mid wave. Because, for example, today, this Kesanta was very, very poor on gold, and I think this is something that he can change. You know, this is something that can change, because I remember in Spring 2, some of his fight selections, some of his collapses just weren't it, you know. But I'm talking in a world where SK Gaming is going to make the World Championship, because that's where we elevate them to. They should be in the conversation for a team that can qualify to the World Championship, and these are the things that I think they need to work on. I think Niski, in terms of his Aussie today, I think it wasn't good. I think his weight performance against Caps was insane. Really fucking good. He hovered to every play, read the map super well, didn't get cut on the rotation back. I think that Niski was really, really good on the Hui. His Azir, I think that in terms of how he fought, came with an additional level of risk. I think that Niski today needed to be carried a little bit by his bot lane, but I think that Niski showed a very positive side to himself in the other two games. So I'm excited for this roster, genuinely. Very, very excited for this roster. I think that this is a very, very good pickup, and SK Gaming, you know, they have some things to work on. But the main question will be is who between Team BDS and SK is going to get ahead. But currently, I think Team BDS is honestly this is just a banger matchup. I think this will be very, very close. Like Ice Labro versus Rahel Luon. Like that is the matchup we want to see right now, man. That is super, super exciting. But okay, we move on. Rogue. I think, you know, I think the main issue, right, is you have way too many players that are afraid to trade and afraid to challenge, so nothing really progresses. Nothing really progresses. It's like, why is Rogue a boring team? I just, like, the game plays itself, right? Like, you're standing on the lane, you're playing against an opponent. You have information that you judge. You can choose to actually actively contest, right? You can actively contest. You can actively push it forward. You can choose to judge the information real time. But I feel like Rogue is so timid in their approach that they are always 2 screens away. I feel like they are afraid of everything. They are literally afraid of everything in my mind. And the main issue there is that nothing is really progressing. They managed to steal a win, right, in their game against, the game against Vitality, of course. They're just kind of, they're kind of playing, the way Rogue plays reminds me of, have you ever played castle defense or like tower defense in fucking Warcraft 3? There's never a level of aggression. You're just kind of staying in your base and holding on for it as long as possible. And then it's like eventually like a big enough wave comes and you lose and you like, then you replay, you know. That's kind of how I feel Rogue is. It's like there's very little initiative taking here, and I think it also stems a little bit from the draft. You know, I think that like the only active plays they did today was on the back of Ashe arrows, and I think that also depicts the problem of Rogue is that they need Ashe arrows to land for them to actively contest any area at all. I said this in my analysis of LEC as well. I think that this is a team that just needs to start over. Coaching staff, player-wise, there's just certain things that have been in the air for too long, because this has been an issue for Rogue for the last 2 years. Legit, man. So I think this team needs to start over. Maybe these players would perform better in a different environment. I feel like the roots just run too deep here. And I just think that I was hoping that Finn would be willing to fire from the hips a little bit more, but he's just playing like he played K'Sante, Udyr K'Sante. And K'Sante is a good, strong champ, right? It's cool, but you kind of want someone here to shoot from the hips, you know? Like you want someone to take some level of initiative, and I think it also starts in the lanes, you know? Like try to force something within the lanes. Mad Lions Koei. Mad Lions Koei now, they took the victory against Team Heretics. I think Mad Lions, it's weird because I think their issues are very solvable. I think in terms of how they play early game, they are a very strong early game team. I think that Alvaro and Super, they lane decent. I think that they are pretty decent early game. But in terms of the positions they put themselves in, they should be very winning. But then 10-minute, 15-minute mark hits, and they seem to not understand how to progress. I think the main thing here is that I think that they try to cut through for a play on side. They're too late on a wave, and then they don't understand that they need to retake river and connect as 4 somehow. And in that process, they get caught, they get killed. Like there was a moment today where Mirren tried to hit a tier 2 at the most random point in time. I feel like they don't understand the synergy the waves have from each other, right? Like if I'm pushing a wave onside neutral, what I need to translate that into is kind of like a chart, right? It's like, oh, I managed to steal a wave on side. My team doesn't have vision on river. I'm going to walk, connect into the river, take the long path, and when the enemy catches on bot, I'll be able to take river with my team because we 4 against 3. And these are the sequences that are missing. Instead, you see Mad Lions in that, oh, I managed to steal a wave. I'm going to try to steal another wave. And then you have Mad Lions players kind of limping in, right? They're trying to limp into the situation. And then they have like these awkward, weird fights where they get caught in between. Like Alvaro got caught a bunch of times. Mirun got caught a bunch of times against Team Heretics. And this is just the story of their mid game. It's just not improving. And I think it's just a question of how do you connect the river? How do you retake river? How do you leverage the fact that you get those deep waves, those side waves, and you have stronger champions in mid and top? How do you leverage that to take control of river and actively progress to play for the enemy camps? I think that's what they're missing, right? They need to be happy with playing for enemy camps. But often Mad Lions are losing games because they're diving tier 2s. They're diving tier 2s when it's not necessary. Pushing for tier 2s when it's not necessary. When the enemy can collapse so easy because of the map shape, right? That's like the main thing they need to figure out, because early game wise, they are one of the best teams. They are simply one of the best teams. But this has been a big issue for Mad Lions for long. Something I can highlight too, I think that Elioya is a very smart jungler, but I feel like he has lost his mechanical sting, you know? I'm isolating Elioya here because he's the big player on this team in my mind. I think Alvaro has showcased that he's a very capable support too. Elioya, I feel like he's lost his mechanical edge, but I think he when he plays the champions that are less mechanically intensive, he's still a very, very cerebral jungle. Like he finds the right gank angles, he's very, very smart about his pathing, so he's still intact there, because I think that's a crucial part of their successful early game. Just Alvaro and Elioya, cooperation. We saw the Zyra jungle, saw some Sejuani action, that's all right, some Vi action, pick the champions that don't require too much mechanical expression, and I think it's fucking solid, solid. I think this team has the potential to move up more, I think they can move up more. I think the loss that they had against K-Corp was atrocious. Like that was the game. They had to lose it 3 times to lose the game. The steal away that Mad Lions did, like that KC did in that matchup, was absolutely crazy, because there's nothing, no other way to put it. It was a massive steal. I think that Mad Lions, in terms of where I expect them to be over time, I still expect them to be higher. I guess it's in a weird way, this is where I expect them to be in due time. Somewhere here. All right, now we move on to KC. KC, I don't envy the situation they're in. They carry so much pressure into the games. So much pressure. Okay? They carry the pressure of the fast splits, of not making it. They carry the weight of the organization, the fandom. These players are under intense pressure because, think about it like this. Most big fan bases are big fan bases because they are winning. And don't get me wrong, KC has won a shit ton in EMEA Masters and LFL and so forth, but now they're into LEC. And having a big ass fan base and all that pressure on you and the pressure to perform when you are one of the weaker teams can be very tough. Like G2, Fnatic are the legacy organizations with big fan bases in the LEC. You think of T1, you think of C9, you think of these organizations, they have big fan bases because they've won and they've carried that momentum, right? So they're carrying I think they're carrying like a momentum of past splits, past knowledge, past experience into winning. While KC need to rebuild that, right? Because the LEC experience is very different, right? So this is an organization that needs time, deserves time. But the players and the coaching staff is under a lot of pressure. Because an additional note, right, is that these players, which can be true for the other teams too, I'm just talking about KC more specifically, like all of these players, except probably like Vladi, they're all playing for the careers. Really playing for the careers. Closer was signed after a very bad split over in North America. He was on the bench. This was a opportunistic situation where he had the shot to go because of how KC collapsed in spring and also in winter, right? And Kana couldn't find Ross in the LCK and jumped on the situation, right? Upset as well, pressure, eyes on him, very big eyes on him. And Vladi, I think that either way, this is a prospect that deserves time. And I think that regardless of where you place Targamas, he's going to be put on the spot, like if they believe they have a better option than Targamas, I'm sure that they will go for it, in the next year, because that rebuild next year is going to be crucial with Kalist. Like Kalist and Vladi, that rebuild needs to land. It needs to be on the spot, because that pressure is of course on the GMs. But talking about the gameplay, I already mentioned that I think that in game 1 that KC played, I think the draft was terrible. I think they couldn't do shit with that draft against Fnatic. I think Fnatic completely outdrafted them. I think they couldn't do much. I think that game 2 against Mad Lions, that shit was a complete steal. I think that if Mad Lions wanted to do something different, I think if Mad Lions made some better decisions, which is not because KC have some crazy pressure on them or something, that was just Mad Lions fumbling the ball, really fumbling the ball because they held the ball. And then even today, right? Today, I think that they had a much better draft and they managed to close out well, but it came off of the back of a Nashor steal that Vladi took, right? Vladi took a Nashor. Against a rogue that plays very timid, there wasn't a lot of progression in the game. The only thing that really moved in the game was Ash Arrows, right? I think that on the day, I think that KC had a much better draft with the Camille, Sejuani, against the LeBlanc composition, and they had the Braum. Braum didn't have any value besides against Nautilus, and then of course the Aphelios of Upset. I think that KC had a much better draft today, so I think that they would have won over time still, but the simplicity of this win is a cause for concern. But for me, the main thing is that I think that how this roster has been built, I think they can play a lot better than they should. I think they can play a lot better than they should. Like, in a lot better. It just, I mentioned this whole conversation of the pressure. It's just, I feel like there is like a mental block, man. There's like a mental block, man. And I'm hoping the 2-1 can be converted into some sense of freedom. I hope that they loosen up. I hope that they can breathe easy. I hope that they can enjoy the games, right? Because they don't seem loose. They seem so tense. Very, very tense. Because I think this roster, these players can do more. They can do. Kana, I think that today on the Camille, I think he did some questionable things, almost got caught a couple of times. I think Kana is a strong laner, but after the fact is having a hard time. Like, you got solo killed in one of the games as Gragas against Kisante, which was very weird. I think that his Jax game build was atrocious. I think Kana, if anybody, needs to show me more. I think the biggest pleasure to watch, I think, so far has been Vladdy. I think that Upset has been good too. Upset and Vladdy have been good. Upset had like the Senna game where he carried a lot of souls. The Jinx he converted in the end, and then today on the Aphelios was solid. I think Vladdy and Upset have been performing good, and that's a very good sign, you know. I think closer, he needs to just drop the Rek'Sai, and I think he can do more. Today the level 3 gank on bot was very awkward, you know, and we shall see. I just hope they loosen up. I really hope they loosen up, and I hope we get a story of a true test of what this roster can be, rather than like folding and succumbing to the pressure. All right, GiantX. GiantX, I think the main thing I want to talk about is just Jackies, man. Jackies, I think Jackies is an exciting signee, you know? It's like, if we think about the new generation of mid laners, like Vladdy and Jackies, I think Jackies is a player that plays to win, you know? Plays to win, like he puts himself out there, he takes chances. In the previous splits, maybe he misexecuted, right? He had some bad executions, but you can definitely see what he's looking for. And I'd rather much have a player that actively looks for opportunities, because these are the type of players that over time will improve. I think that Jackies is an impressive player. Then we have Tony. I think Tony, D'Antonio, I think that the main thing here for me that I've noticed is he had a solid Rumble game today. I think the main thing is that his read for the engages on mid-wave are really, really bad. That's the main thing that he needs to focus on and improve on. Like, his engage angles on mid-wave are really, really bad. GX is a team that never plays position. They just engage on the mid-wave into compositions that want to be engaged into. I think they need to have a better read of what their composition wants to do and actually set up their carries for success. But they are just engaging on mid-waves. If you watch LGD this morning, you saw them having the same issue where the Alistar and Zyra tried to engage on mid-wave, but in reality, they need to play with Fog of War. You make yourself so much bigger when you're not walking straight at the enemy, because the enemy is going to play like accordingly, right? But if you're in Fog of War, you become so large because you can be under every corner. It's just way better to play that way. And I think D'Antonio kind of have like this very outdated way of playing the macro game. I think if he recognizes that he should play position more, I think things can work out. I feel like Lignar and Juhan, I think these two players look very unenthusiastic. I think that Jackies and Antonio are doing like their best to try to win the game. I think that Ignar and Juhan, I think they have so many misses mechanically that it makes it strange to play. Like Dom said this when we were co-streaming, it just looks like there is a language barrier between everybody on this team, you know? Patrick, hard to judge Patrick, I'm not gonna lie. It's very hard to judge Patrick in all these games. It is like judging AD carry based on these games is very difficult, so I don't want to say much, but it's been kind of like a passenger to the situation that they've been in. Like Gumuyushi said it best, it's like AD carries are the egg in the ramen, you know? Makes it pricey and expensive, but bro, if the broth is burnt and the noodles were in the sink and someone added piss as the flavoring, you know, like it doesn't matter what your egg's gonna do, you know? All right. So G2. So G2, it's very clear that they didn't practice too much on the patch. They didn't practice too much coming into this weekend, and they played some decent opponents, right? They played some decent opponents. They played and lost against SK and BDS, you know? So I don't think that there is any reason or cause for concern. I think that some of the reads in terms of what they drafted seems to be kind of outdated. You know, they played some Vi today. I think that Caps didn't carry games that he carried in spring. It just seems like this team, are starting very slow, and I don't think I would be worried about anything. I don't even think there's a reason to bring up any of the issues. It's just the main thing is like their meta read. Some of the players seem out of form. Like Caps on that Azir game looked very, very unsharp, right? It just seems like this team, took a little bit more time to rest, which they deserve after a very long MSI. And with aspirations of doing well at the World Championship, I don't really care. I'm not worried. Fnatic, honestly, Fnatic, I think, have been probably the best drafting team of the LEC. I think that Fnatic starting 3-0, they beat a GiantX, they beat a K Corp, and then finally they beat a Vitality. So the schedule wasn't the hardest, of course, but I think in terms of where they land meta-wise, I think that's like the most interesting thing, because I think, after the MSI, the main thing that they need to work on, of course, is how they make Noah feel comfortable so June doesn't get affected by his gameplay, and where they are mentally, right? Because this is a team that has such a high ceiling, but also a very low floor. And working on that consistency is key. I think June is very good, but I think that the main thing I want to highlight is just Noah getting to play Aphelios, right? He gets to play Aphelios. He gets to play the Zeri. He played a little Corki. The crit ADCs is where I like Noah, I think that when he gets rewarded for laning well, and then his champion kind of plays itself later on, I think it's good. Apples is in the chat, and Apples for sure, you guys got Giga cooked in this draft. I don't know what you guys were cooking here, but all good. 2-1, I hope. Apples, the most important thing a coach needs to be able to do after a positive weekend is to leverage that 2-1 into a big confidence builder, man. Big confidence builder, build the confidence of the boys, because they need to loosen up, man. They need to loosen up. The KC lads there, they seem so tense. There's such a pressure-filled situation. I think that they can do a lot better for sure. And I think you know that too. But I hope you guys really take this 2-1 and leverage into some sort of celebration, Regardless of how the wins were. Focusing on that kind of removes from the potential positive impact that 2-1 can have. It brings me back to when we lost against RNG, right? 2018, we lost against RNG, played against Vitality. We were in Vitality, and we played against RNG. And the first match, we lost, right? We got outplayed, we got smashed. But I needed to sell. I could feel in the players that they didn't believe that we could beat RNG. So I had to structure the review in a way where I say, guys, if we didn't do this one, look at the game position. We could have done this and we could have won, right? I structured it from a point of view of tangible action. So guys, we made 2 crucial mistakes. Otherwise, this game was very competitive if we put them on the ropes. And then walking into the RNG game, it's like, guys, I know we're underdogs. But guys, what are the odds of us being together in this moment in time? What are the odds of us qualifying to World Championship? What are the odds of any one of us even being born? We beat all of those odds, so we're gonna care about some odds. We play against RNG? Fuck that shit. Let's kill him. I hope KC is selling. But okay, Fnatic, I mentioned, Zeri, Aphelios, Noah. I think Noah is at his best when the champion plays itself, when it gets to certain item breakpoints. And that's where the crit meta is at. And I think that in terms of laning, I think that Noah has always been decent. I don't think this has been like the main issue for him ever. They cooked with the Ivan. I think that's a solid read. They had a little poppy action into, of course, the Jackson was prime. I think that's solid too. And then we saw the Galio against LB. I honestly think with the current version of First Strike, I don't think this is a counter. But I do think that Galio is strong because of his itemization and he's just a tank. So he's always going to be somewhat useful, especially if the enemy team is going for the cannon. Because I do think Vitality's draft here, like pairing Senna together with a mid laner that has 0, like DPS, I think is a very big mistake. Always pair Senna together with the Tristanas and the Talias and the Azirs of this world, because you need someone to be able to kill any potential champion that is in the game. Here the enemy team has Xin Zhao, Galio, and Nautilus. When are these guys gonna die? They're not gonna die. And they can always push you forward on your cannon, on your LeBlanc, and they can deny their entry to the backline. So I think that Fnatic, crucial thing is I like the read of the meta, and the main test will be is like how will they carry the momentum, because keep in mind their opponents were rather weak this weekend, you know, in terms of where we are placing Fnatic. In terms of the league, you know, the state of the league as a whole, I think that the Corki ADC and Ivan is very interesting because that's unique to the LEC. It's not something that we saw in the LPL, which is the other major region that is active currently. I don't know what it is, but I personally feel less excited watching LEC than I have in the past. But I can't quite put my finger on it. I can't quite put my finger on why. I'm not so sure why. I need to do some self-exploration. But maybe you guys can tell me in the chat, or maybe on, of course, you know, on the YouTube comments. It's just that there's something, like the main thing that stands out to me is the format, you know? Like the format is extremely draining. I think that there's something about BO1s and being forced to watch BO1s. It's just something about that makes me not invested. But the intention behind this format was for the viewers. I am very addicted to Elden Ring. Maybe that is the issue. Could be. Not sure. But anyhow. This format is terrible. I can tell you from a competitive standpoint, it's also terrible. I hate it. I played it for one split, and obviously I'm very biased because we went 10th place, but it sucks. It sucks. It's really bad.